This is the opening ball game for this session, and we're glad that many of you are on the screen. And I call to order the Subcommittee on Oversight. I want to thank everyone for being here. We're holding this hearing virtually in compliance with the regulations for remote committee proceedings. Before we turn to today's important topic, I want to remind members of a few procedures to help you navigate the virtual hearing. First, consistent with the regulations, the committee will keep microphones muted to limit background noise. Members are responsible for unmuting themselves when they seek recognition or when recognized for their 5 minutes. Second, when members are present in the proceeding, they must have the cameras on. If you need to step away to attend another proceeding, please turn your camera on and audio off rather than logging. Have the camera off and audio off rather than logging out of the platform. Third, we will dispense with our practice of observing the Gibbons rule, and we'll go instead, when it's possible, in order to move to seniority for questioning, alternating between the minority and the majority, beginning with members of the Oversight Subcommittee, and our other people who apparently are joining us on other committees. Finally, without objection, Representative Horsford, my friend from Nevada, is authorized to serve as chair in the event that I experience technical difficulties. I thank you all for your continued patience. I'm really honored that we've got some very good people on this committee from both sides of the aisle. And with that, I will now turn to the important topic of today's hearing: free tax preparation during the pandemic. I always like to see that word free. Welcome to the first hearing on the 117th Congress for the Oversight Subcommittee. I'm excited for the opportunity to chair the important panel again. We're following the footsteps of a legend, my friend John Lewis. I know that I can never fill his shoes, but I promise you I'm going to try and do my best. The subject of today's hearing could not be more timely, with the opening of the 2021 IRS filing season. Happened just last Friday. We're going to examine the free tax preparation services that are available for moderate income and low income taxpayers, as well as the elderly. It is particularly important to make sure that these services are widely available and up to snuff. The economic disruption caused by the pandemic makes it essential that working taxpayers file their returns early so that they can receive their refunds ASAP. Free tax prep services enable taxpayers to claim tax credits, and that's critical. So we want everybody to get what they're entitled to. And because low-income taxpayers depend on the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit to stay out of poverty, available tax prep services can be a matter of life or death. I'm delighted that we have one of my constituents testifying here today, Ms. Yvonne Zydema of the Passaic County, New Jersey, United Way. I have visited her in the program, which is traditionally located right across the street from my district office in downtown Paterson, New Jersey. I know that the pandemic has likely severely disrupted their tax prep services and also greatly increased the demand for other United Way services in our community. I look forward to hear everyone's testimony, and including Yvonne's. Let me now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Kelly, Pennsylvania, for 5 minutes for the purposes of an opening statement. Mr. Kelly?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
5 minutes.
Okay, well, yeah, that's hard to do, Billy, you know that. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for holding the hearing today. And I want to thank all our witnesses for you to take time out of your personal lives, not only in this tax preparation work that you do, but to sit here today and help us through the hearing that we're having. Look, when we set out to draft and pass the Taxpayer First Act with Mr. Lewis, I think that was one of the best things we had done as a bipartisan effort. This wasn't a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. This was just us trying to help our constituents. And what the idea was that let's make the IRS more like a customer service department as opposed to a pure enforcement agency. And it's sometimes hard to do that. You get that letter from the IRS, and the next thing you do is go on the phone and say, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on, but would you help me with this? Now, that legislation was a great step in the right direction, and the work to help modernize and improve the IRS continues. They need a lot of help to update. So today we're going to build on that work by considering the unique challenges facing taxpayers today during the pandemic. Look, we know that our voluntary tax system operates not just through the work of the IRS, but through nonprofit partners and private sector partners. Our witnesses today are going to share the knowledge and experience and the resources that they have available to help taxpayers in need of tax filing assistance and how that assistance is being offered in the context of this pandemic. Now, I'm thrilled to have Gary Rauschenberger, who's from right here, the town that I'm in, sitting in now, from Butler, Pennsylvania, on the list today on the panel. Now, Gary's been a volunteer and a district director for the AARP Foundation's tax aid program in Butler County in my district. And Gary's been, listen to this, for 16 years, Gary has done this. And when we talked on the phone, the reason he does it is he wants to help his fellow citizens through some very difficult navigation when it comes to taxes. So Gary gives his own time and talents and service to his community. And I know there's a lot of others like Gary all over the country that work hard with no financial reward to help people satisfy their tax filing obligation. Now, these people aren't government employees, and they don't do this work for financial reward. They do it to help their friends, their neighbors, and their fellow taxpayers. People like Gary help our communities thrive and prosper. So before we proceed, I want to take a moment to thank Gary and all of our volunteers across the country working to support their neighbors during this tax filing season. Now, as we move forward with today's hearing, I'm excited to hear a boots on the ground discussion of the challenges our taxpayers are facing during this pandemic. And sometimes in Washington, we work on a high-level policy issue, and that's important, but it's also important to hear from the people back home who actually do this work face-to-face and help our fellow citizens know. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today about the challenges that exist in our local communities and across our country, and what actions we should consider to help ease those challenges. I'm also hoping to learn more about the resources available to all of our constituents. And I hope that all of our members will be able to take what we learned today and amplify that information back in our home district. So again, Mr. Chairman, Bill, thank you so much for having this. To all our panelists, thanks for what you do every day to help your fellow citizens. It's incredible. And I don't know of other countries around the world that think as much about their fellow citizens as we Americans do. So I want to thank you all for being here. And Bill, great idea, great hearing. Really looking forward to hearing from everybody. And thanks so much. And again, Gary, thank you. And your fellow panelists, thank you all for being here with us today. You guys are great.
Thank you.
With that, I yield back.
I appreciate your contribution this morning, this afternoon, to get us ready to hear from our panel, and then questions and answers. I hope they're all crisp. Keep the questions short later on, and we hope we keep the answers short as well. We're going to hear from our panel now. Thank you to our distinguished witnesses for taking the time to appear before us today to discuss this this is a critical issue. We're going to have many sessions on taxes. Some will be nice, and some will not be nice. We'll see. We want to discuss this important issue because we want those services out there so people have no excuse whatsoever that they can't do their taxes. And of course, the more people do their taxes, the more revenue and the less pressure on the rest of the budget. So here we go for the testimony. Our first witness is Rebecca Thompson, Ms. Thompson is Director of Field Examination and Taxpayer Opportunity Network for Prosperity. I hope I got that right, Rebecca. The title is her network partners with VITA sites across the country to provide free tax preparation services. Our next witness is Lynette Lee Villanueva. She is the Vice President of the AARP Foundation Tax Aid, which provides free tax preparation to seniors across the country. Our third witness is Yvonne Zydema. She is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the United Way of Passaic County, New Jersey, which provides free tax preparation services through United Way VITA programs. And our final witness is Gary Rauschenberger. He is the District Coordinator for the AARP Foundation Tax Aid in Butler County, Pennsylvania, which provides free tax preparation services to seniors. Each of your statements will be made a part of the record in its entirety. I would ask you that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes or less. To help you with that time, please keep an eye on the clock. It should already be pinned to your screen. If you go over your time, I will notify you with a little tap of the gavel. Ms. Thompson, welcome, and you may begin.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Pascal, Ranking Member Kelly, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity, particularly to be the first witness of the first hearing for the 117th Congress. It is an honor to testify before you today on how the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, the VITA program, continues to meet the free tax preparation needs of low-income families in communities across America, even during the pandemic. Excuse me. Let me thank you for your ongoing support of the VITA program, including passing the VITA Permanence Act in 2019 as a part of the Taxpayer First Act, codifying the VITA program and setting the maximum federal funding level for the program at $30 million. For over 50 years, the IRS has enlisted the support of community partners to leverage the strength, skill, and goodwill of thousands of volunteers to prepare and file tax returns for low-income Americans during the annual filing season. VITA volunteers come from all walks of life and endure a rigorous training and certification process to help low-income, elderly, disabled, and limited English-speaking tax filers complete and file an accurate tax return, claim federal, state, and local credits for which they are eligible, and access other financial capability services to strengthen their family's financial well-being at tax time. Over the last 4 years in my role at Prosperity Now, I've led a national network that serves as a convening body for stakeholders that includes VITA program managers, site coordinators, volunteers, community, corporate, and philanthropic partners, as well as others. We provide channels for practitioners to connect with one another. We develop tools and resources, share relevant information, and provide technical assistance to strengthen VITA programs, ensure quality return preparation, and extend the program's reach to more low-income Americans. I'm also usually a VITA volunteer site coordinator, but this year, like many of the physical VITA site locations across the country, my site is closed due to the pandemic. The 300 or so families we usually serve will now have to seek alternative options to file their taxes this year. In a typical year, there are just over 3,700 VITA sites across the country to help households who earn, on average, just about $26,000 a year. Last year, just before the mass closures of VITA sites and just about everything else in mid-March, our partners had filed just over 828,000 returns. They quickly worked to develop strategies to resume service. Alternative service delivery models like drop-off, facilitated self-access, and virtual VITA, which had all been explored and piloted to some degree in the previous filing seasons, rose to the forefront as solutions during the pandemic. Our partners use digital platforms like Zoom, Google Meet, Dropbox, JotForm, email, as well as others as a means to communicate with taxpayers throughout the return preparation process. During the summer and fall of 2020, many VITA programs partnered with other local community organizations and state agencies for messaging outreach and to assist non-filers and vulnerable populations with registering for the economic impact payment. The EIP outreach has highlighted the difficulties in reaching the most vulnerable populations in our communities, including those without email addresses or bank accounts or even access to the internet. By the end of October, VITA programs had served just over 1 million clients, a notable achievement, but still falling short of the 1.3 million clients we had served in the previous filing season. The normal barriers to success for VITA programs, like technology, volunteer recruitment and training, marketing, and more, have been exacerbated by the pandemic, requiring almost a complete shift in program operations to continue to deliver services. However, the lessons learned from the extended 2020 filing season have proven valuable in easing the transition to broader implementation this year. We asked our members to share how they plan to serve their clients this year. We got about 100 responses, and of those responses, most of our partners are offering a menu of tax prep options, including things like limited contact drop-off models, using Get Your Refund, and limited appointment-only sites. For millions of hardworking Americans, the task of completing a tax return can be daunting. It is not a task that our VITA partners and volunteers take lightly, and they have deliberated extensively over the last several months, even now, on how to get the information we need to prepare a tax return safely and securely during this pandemic. Thank you again for your ongoing support of the VITA program. Thank you, Chairman Pasquarell and Ranking Member Kelly, for the opportunity to share information with the subcommittee about the VITA program. I look forward to answering any questions you or the other members may have.
We're going to have plenty of questions, Ms. Thompson, but I wanted to thank you for staying within the parameters of the 5 minutes. I have to learn to do that most of the time, too. But we're going to get to the questions after we hear the rest of the panel. Thank you. Our next speaker, our next panelist is Ms. Lee Villanueva, and you're recognized for 5 minutes, and thank you for being here.
Ms. Lee Villanueva, you have to unmute. There you are. You're good.
There I am. Okay. I apologize for that. But thank you, Chairman Pasquarell, Ranking Member Kelly, and members of the Oversight Subcommittee for the invitation to testify today on behalf of the free taxpayer services during the pandemic. I am Lynette Lee Villanueva, Vice President and National Director for AARP Foundation TaxAid. We appreciate the opportunity to share information about the program and our services to the American taxpayer. TaxAid is the nation's largest free, volunteer-based tax assistance and preparation program administered in conjunction with the Internal Revenue Service. Our nationwide tax preparation program is aimed at people aged 50 and older and those who have low to moderate incomes. TaxAid services are free of charge. We serve multicultural populations, the homebound and disabled, and communities in underserved and rural and urban areas. TaxAid started in 1968 with just 4 volunteers, and since then, with the support of Tax Counseling for the Elderly, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, and the AARP Foundation, TaxAid has served more than 68 million people. Our more than 36,000 volunteers go through rigorous training and IRS certification annually to ensure they know the latest U.S. tax laws. They typically serve in approximately 4,800 locations in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and help over 2 million people prepare and file their federal and state tax returns. Many of our volunteers have stayed with the program for more than 20 years. For over 5 decades, TaxAid has provided face-to-face tax services in neighborhood locations such as libraries, banks, and senior centers. If we weren't for the local organizations that donate space for TaxAid to operate, volunteers would not be able to serve those in need. But with COVID-19, TaxAid had to adapt quickly to prioritize the health and safety of volunteers and taxpayers. When TaxAid suspended the operations last March due to the pandemic, volunteers and staff quickly shifted to online services. Taxpayers prepare their own returns with assistance from TaxAid Volunteer via screen sharing platforms. TaxAid also provided taxpayers access to free software and reopened a number of in-person sites where it could be done safely. Volunteer and taxpayer feedback indicates that these were valuable and needed services. An 80-year-old taxpayer from New Jersey who completed her first tax return with the help of a volunteer stated, "I can't believe I actually completed a tax return on a computer. Thank you for being so patient." In the unusual year of 2020, 1.5 million taxpayers who served TaxAid received more than $1 billion in income tax refunds. We are applying the lessons learned in 2020 to help expand the program's reach for the 2021 tax season and beyond. Beginning this month, AARP Foundation TaxAid will continue its decades of service by offering appointment-only services, including modified in-person services with strict physical distancing in limited locations, low-contact services for taxpayers who want to meet volunteers in a brief meeting to exchange documents, contact-free services for taxpayers who only want to interact with volunteers online or by phone and exchange documents electronically. And finally, self-preparation, in which TaxAid provides consumers with software to prepare their own return and, if needed, a volunteer to coach them through the process by phone or through computer screen sharing. We have already seen an extraordinary demand for these services, with over 100,000 inquiries since January of 2021, and many of our volunteers indicate they are already at or near service capacity. We appreciate the committee's efforts today to better understand the taxpayers' filing experience during the pandemic, and we stand ready to serve as a resource to help improve the tax filing experience for everyone. Thank you.
And now I'd like to call on Ms. Zydema. You may begin. And so far, two excellent presentations. Ms. Zydema.
Thank you. Chairman Pascrell, Ranking Member Kelly, and members of the Oversight Subcommittee, I'm honored to come before the committee today to talk about United Way of Passaic County's work to help people file their federal and state taxes through the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. Millions of low-income Americans work hard for wages, but face obstacles in filing their taxes. In cases where people don't owe taxes, they often don't realize they are entitled to tax refunds that can have a huge positive impact on a family. This is where the VITA program comes in. This work is even more crucial now that economic impact payments are expedited through the tax system. For more than 80 years, United Way of Passaic County has been responding to the needs of the community. Together with thousands of individual donors and volunteers, and private, public, and social sector partners, we help our community to address inequities in access to healthcare, education, and economic opportunities. We do this by strengthening literacy and supporting high school graduation and access to post-secondary education, creating healthy neighborhoods and access to healthy, affordable food, and of course, promoting personal financial stability and security. United Way of Passaic County is part of the network of 1,100 local United Ways. We support and advance policies to reduce poverty and encourage work, including the expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit and Child Tax Credit. We urge Congress to make the CTC available to all children except those families with the highest incomes, and making an expanded EITC available to more low-paid workers without children. VITA matches people to the EITC and CTC. This program is a free volunteer-based tax assistance and preparation program assisting low and moderate income individuals with state and federal returns. For more than 10 years, United Way has helped working low-income Passaic County community members file their taxes. And in 2015, we became a grantee of the IRS VITA program. Since then, we have prepared and filed over 6,000 tax returns for our community. And I have seen how even modest refunds are a lifeline for adults struggling to make ends meet. I'd like to tell you what the VITA program means to our community. First, VITA helps people through the intimidating and expensive process of tax preparation. Low-income Americans are not immune to complex tax issues and deal with identity theft, disputes over dependents, and prior year tax problems. They deserve access to quality tax advice and preparation. Second, VITA provides a trusted service for individuals who are hesitant to interact with government for any number of reasons. And finally, VITA helps low-income workers file an accurate tax return and maximize available tax credits, including EITC, CTC, and education tax credits. In fact, this past Saturday, our program prepared a tax return for a woman who's entitled to receive a $9,000 federal refund. VITA volunteers are trained and certified by the IRS. We have volunteers who return from year to year, and we work to maintain a high rate of accuracy in our returns. Our community members trust and rely on the volunteers for their tax filing each year. Some clients and volunteers have been together for years. Our volunteer service also protects people from exploitative tax services. As the pandemic threatens the health and financial security of millions of Americans, VITA has innovated and expanded services to help people avoid missing out on the tax credits and deductions they have earned. One of the best innovations is our partnership with My Free Taxes for free online tax preparation for low-income taxpayers. Since 2009, more than 1.3 million low and moderate income people have used My Free Taxes. The program has helped individuals and households save $260 million in filing fees and receive $1.9 billion in refunds. In 2020, United Way and our partners assisted at least 7 million non-filers to use IRS tools and obtain their economic impact payment. We will continue this work in 2021 to help roughly 5 million Americans who typically do not file taxes and still have not received their EIP. As I close, I want to note that several members of this committee, including Chairman Pascrell, have visited or promoted the VITA program to their constituents and supported the expansion of refundable credits, and we thank you. VITA, EITC, CTC, and the economic impact payments will help communities like Passaic County and throughout the United States recover and rebuild. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zydema. We appreciate your presentation, and I wish I had time to tell them all the great things you've done in the community for people who really need help and are really trying. So thanks again. Now I'd like to introduce another person who's helped so many people, Mr. Rauschenberger from Pennsylvania. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before your committee today. My name is Gary Rauschenberger, and I am testifying as an individual to explain the need to extend the IRS's filing deadline from April 15th to July 15th, like it did last year. I am a resident of Butler County, Pennsylvania, and I have been a volunteer in the AARP Foundation's tax aid program for the past 16 years. I currently serve as a district coordinator and am responsible for ensuring that our free service is provided in accordance with our program's established policies and procedures within my county. My local district has about 24 volunteers who serve at 6 sites throughout Butler County. We can usually e-file about 100 returns each week. Last year, our clients had an average adjusted gross income under $22,000. Our national office supports us by providing us with the equipment and the supplies we need. It is my responsibility to recruit the volunteers and to find sites that are willing to host our program by donating space to us during the tax season, which typically runs for 10 weeks from February 1st to April 15th. Our program works in conjunction with the IRS, who provides the software for our computers. The IRS and the AARP Foundation each provide us with training materials. In the past, our public site hosts in Butler County included libraries, senior centers, and a church. However, the spreading virus last March resulted in the suspension of our service nationwide. We then had to contact hundreds of clients who had upcoming scheduled appointments to inform them that our service was being suspended and that we would contact them again when we knew when and where our service would resume. A few days later, the U.S. Treasury announced an extension of the usual April 15th filing deadline to July 15th. That 3-month extension gave both us and our customers the additional time we needed to safely resume our in-person service in June, but only at our sites which were not located at libraries, while following newly established preventative measures like mandatory masks, social distancing, and sanitizing tables between every client in order to keep everyone reasonably safe from the virus. When planning for the current tax season, our national office developed several new methods of delivering our service in addition to our traditional in-person method. All of the new delivery methods emphasize safety by featuring limited to no in-person time with our clients. In most cases, the time not being spent in person with clients has been shifted by greater reliance on technology, like scanning, emailing, telephoning, etc. While most of my volunteers are willing to freely donate their time via our in-person delivery method, very few have expressed interest in any of the new virtual delivery methods. All of the new methods require greater volunteer time, effort, and knowledge to prepare even the simplest of returns. Although our tax season usually opens in early February, because there were tax law changes passed in late December, the IRS was unable to begin processing any returns before last Friday. Even the sites using one of the newer virtual service methods lost almost 2 weeks from their usual season. All tax aid sites nationwide are providing our service by appointment only this year. Since our district, like most others, does not maintain a local office and phone number, for the past 5 years, we have partnered with 211 to schedule our tax appointments for our clients. Since we did not know when we would be able to open this season for tax service, 211 agreed to instead put our telephoning clients' names and phone numbers on a waiting list for each of our sites. Our waiting lists are now over 2/3 full and should be completely filled by the end of this month. Earlier this month, I invited my eligible volunteers who were interested in receiving a COVID-19 vaccination to complete a registration form for our local hospital to schedule them for the first of 2 required doses. I anticipate that most of them will have been vaccinated by mid-March. Since most of the clients we see are over age 65, I expect that most of those clients who want to be vaccinated will be by the end of April. I am hoping that TaxAid will allow us to offer our in-person service to anyone who has been vaccinated by the end of April, when the virus stage should be much better than it is today. We have already trained the volunteers, our sites are ready, we have the equipment that we need to open. Other than getting the virus under control, the thing that we need most is additional time to file to serve our 10 weeks worth of clients who will soon be on our waiting list. I welcome any questions anyone may have.
Bill, you're still muted.
The vaccination is a great idea and enticing, encouraging people to come who are eligible to get their taxes done. So I thank you. At this time, I'm going to open a hearing for questions. Each member will be recognized for 5 minutes to question our witnesses without objection. If the witnesses will respond with short and concise answers, all members should be able to ask questions. As mentioned earlier, we will not observe the Gibbons rule in this remote setting and will instead go in order of seniority. alternating between the minority and the majority, beginning with the members of the Oversight Committee, and then getting to the members who have thankfully joined us today. Members are reminded to unmute yourselves when you are recognized for your 5 minutes. So I'll start off the questions. It's a question for Ms. Thompson. One of our panelists testified that the filing season should be extended. A few have said. Do you agree, and do your partners support an extension? Ms. Thompson?
Thank you, Chairman Pascal, for your question. We have actually, I hear
We can hear you.
Okay, we've actually asked our partners whether or not they support extending a filing season, and I will tell you that many of our partners actually already prepare returns through October 15th as a part of a year-round program. So many of them will be open and continue to prepare returns anyway. With regard to whether or not the IRS should extend the filing deadlines, our partners actually have not indicated one way or another any strong support either way for extending the filing deadline. I will say that there are concerns about any additional legislation or economic impact payments that may come out during the midst of the filing season that may cause a disruption to the filing season if the IRS has to administer those payments in the heart of the filing season, in which case we would support extending the filing season due to the disruptions.
A question to Ms. Zydema. Do you agree the filing season should be extended? And do you have an opinion on the length of the extension?
Yes, we would agree as well with extending the filing season, given the added time that it's taking to prepare taxes now, because we can have, fewer people in the room at a time, and the time that it takes to scan and upload and do those extra things, our efficiency is somewhat down. So a little bit of extra time would help. From the VITA perspective, one of the considerations is being volunteer staffed, how many additional weeks we can keep volunteers.
What could be the negative side of extending the time? Any negatives?
No negatives. We would just moderate expectations about how many more additional weeks we can keep the volunteers on board.
Yeah. Well, you saw, last year, of course, was obvious. We were at the end when the pandemic really hit, and so we had to make all kinds of adjustments. And by the way, did that lower your rate of how many people came in to see you?
It did. We had an extra challenge. You're familiar with the building that we're in, and that building closed to us in March, and we weren't able to get access again for several months.
Another question. What are you seeing on the ground in Passaic County in terms of mood and anxiety of taxpayers? And how can constituents find out about free tax preparation services? If you don't communicate this, that does not help. If we don't help you communicate it, that's not helping you. And how would United Way conduct outreach to low-income individuals? You see the problem we have with the census all the time. And even though this would be a tremendous asset to somebody to get some help on preparing their taxes, there's a million questions. There's a million questions. And I'm sure many times when people don't reach out to you, they many times are hurt in the bottom line of what they get back. So what's the temperature out there right now?
We are definitely seeing that people are eager to begin the filing process. And we had a couple hundred calls and requests for appointments back in January before the filing season even began. And now we are seeing our online appointments begin to fill up quite quickly. So we know that, as much capacity as we have is going to be filled. Many people come to us year after year, and we've been able to build up some good word of mouth. But we also, in Passaic County, as well as United Way across the country, we do a couple of things to really promote the program. The first one is that all that information is available on 211, the information and referral hotline that's available through phone and internet. So all the tax sites provide information about when and where. We also do aggressive social media outreach, and we're using materials provided by United Way to do that.
My final question, I thank you, but can you give me a brief answer on this? The recent reports that I've read have stated that Americans are finding that they are the victim of fraud when they receive information returns for unemployment benefits, for instance. We're going to go through that again, ones that they didn't receive. As you know, unemployment benefits are taxable, and victims are harmed, alarmed, and confused about what they should do. Are VITA sites able to help these taxpayers file their tax returns?
Short answer, yes.
I'm going to ask that question. I know you were going to say yes. I'm going to ask that question on Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman, for your question. And the short answer is yes. Our partners are able to help people file these tax returns. Typically, what we ask clients to do, consistently what we ask clients to do is to absolutely bring all of the necessary documents to our sites or present them in whatever service delivery model they're having their returns prepared through, to bring all documents. So if a client presents and they suspect that they've been a victim of unemployment fraud, the VITA volunteers will first direct them back to the state agency and encourage them to try to get a corrected 1099-G with the correct amounts of unemployment that they received during the last year.
Thank you very, very much. Did you want us to quickly add something?
I was going to say, in addition, we will follow all IRS guidance. The IRS recently released some guidance with regard to how to handle the issue of the incorrect 1099-Gs. And so our volunteers are trained to follow all IRS guidance with regard to how to report that income on the return.
This is a big problem, bigger than many of us think. And we need to take a look at this very carefully. I thank you for your answer. And now it's my pleasure to recognize Mr. Kelly for 5 minutes, our ranking member, for 5 minutes to ask his questions. Mr. Kelly.
Hey, thank you, Chairman. Now, I think Bill and I both said this in our opening statements, but I want to, again, thank all of you for being on this panel today because it's so critical. One of the things that I'm interested in, and I'll probably direct most of my questions to you, Gary, because we're in the same district and what we're doing, this is going to go on our site, and hopefully we'll have other constituents looking on it and getting ideas about how to handle these things. When you talk about that 211 call to create the waiting list for seniors who need tax help, and it's 2/3 full right now. So if these people want to get on these wait lists, what is the number that they need to call? Is there some other way to contact? I mean, how do they get there?
Okay. Well, it really is as simple as it sounds. I mean, as long as they know to call 211, a lot of people that have been coming to us for years understand the way we've been doing this. But for the people that don't, when they first hear about 211, they don't understand, well, what else do I dial? I said, well, everyone's heard of 911, but 211 is a helpline that's designed for people that have a human service need, like income tax preparation. 911 is for emergencies, but 211 is for human service needs, and it's expanding all across the country. We were very fortunate about 5 years ago now that we partnered with 211, but it greatly simplified it and made it possible for people to schedule an appointment. Before that, the only thing people could do would be to come into our site, and it was a first come, first served basis. And that was the biggest shortcoming of our program, because when you have an elderly person coming in to sit down, if you knew you were going to be able to do, say, 24 people that day, if they got there, at 9 o'clock when the site opened, they might be there till 3 o'clock until their number came up. And that's a long time for an elderly person to be just sitting in a folding chair. They did it because it was important enough to them to get their taxes done, but we came up with a better solution for that. And so now we use 211, and they make their appointment, with them, and it works out really very well. But this year, because of the virus, and we couldn't actually assign appointments, all we could do is put them on our waiting list. So at least they know that they're on the waiting list. Now it just becomes a question of, once we find out when we can open, then our local volunteers, not 211, but our local volunteers will then call them back to give them an appointment. So, it was our sort of like our plan B, but I have no reason to think that it won't work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know in our district, because we have a lot of our population are seniors, and a lot of them live in rural areas, and they're not as comfortable doing things online. And a lot of them, I think we would rather have people do it electronically, but they do want to do the paper return. And that's a challenge. That's really a challenge. When you and I talked on the phone and talking about how do you open those offices now where people can come in, because in the pandemic, it's really hard to do. And I know we're running out of time on this, but I think the greatest challenge we face today is our inability sometimes to use the electronic that's available to us because of a reluctance to use it. And how do we get there? So if there's anything else you want our seniors to know, our people from the rural parts of our district to know, what would it be? Because this whole thing that the chairman's putting on today is, how do we help our fellow Americans get through this? And the other thing, I'll just mention it real quick. I don't know how many of you get the same thing, but people will tell me, I got a call from the IRS, and I think I have a big problem. I said, the IRS will never call you. The IRS will contact you through the mail. And I think that if we all can make sure that we tell people that and get that message out, that's going to save a lot of this anxiety that people have when they get these phone calls. So the challenge, we got great technology, but not everybody's comfortable with it. So for you to open these offices, this is a tough thing right now, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's why, our clients prefer the in-person contact, and we would much rather prefer the in-person contact. The virus has made that much more difficult, at the moment. But again, there's sort of light at the end of the tunnel, and we can see, things will get better, but it's not going to be fixed by April 15th. But I think that realistically speaking, the people that we serve, the 65 and over primarily, those are the people that are getting vaccinated now. So I have great hopes that it can be a win-win all the way around, that they'll feel comfortable coming into us, and we'll feel comfortable serving them in person as we have traditionally.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you again. That, to lower that anxiety for our fellow citizens is really critical, especially when it comes to the IRS, because there's a fear factor there. Instead of it being a customer service center, it's sometimes a law enforcement center. So if we can flip it. Mr. Chairman, thanks again. Fantastic panel and great job holding this today, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And the chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Chu. And I got to say to Ms. Chu, Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You thought I didn't know.
Okay, well, I wanted to ask Ms. Lee Villanueva about tax services for seniors. And I know you have such an important program, the AARP Foundation Tax Aid Program. But I read with concern that that in 2019 you had served 2.5 million taxpayers, but in 2020 it fell to 1.5 million taxpayers. So that's a drop of 1 million. Can you tell me, how did those seniors do their taxes? And do you think that in this 2021 season, that in 2021 we can rebound to the 2019 levels? And what I know you've adapted with these new models, the in-person, low contact, and no contact models. Which of these models work well? What kind of lessons can be learned from that?
Well, we were unfortunately not able to serve last year everybody that we had again served in 2019, and that was unfortunate for us. Once the filing season was extended, we were able to reopen and serve some people across the country, but not at the numbers we were able to serve in 2019. And that's something that, it's hard for us to accept, but we do know that we did leave people behind last year just because we were shut down from March through almost June with the pandemic going on. What we did learn last year is that where we had traditionally, you've heard from Mr. Rauschenberger, that our service has always been traditionally in person. What we learned last year is that having a more varying options available did prove to be very beneficial, and we continue to work throughout the rest of 2020 to add additional service models on, plus to refine those that we were able to quickly stand up, the self-preparation and coaching model as an example. And with the virtual, there are a number of people that it's going to be difficult for them to use virtual service, either because they're just not familiar with technology, or they may not even have access to broadband service to be able to engage in that way. So but where we can do that, we know that we can then serve those in that way, and we can also then have our in-person service for those who really need to see us in person. So that is one thing that we expect going forward in future years to have the service models we're rolling out this year, to have them as a viable option as well, continuing going forward.
Well, thanks. I'd also like to discuss the earned income tax credit for older workers. Under current law, EITC is available for workers between 25 and 64, but the age for full Social Security benefits is 66 or 67 for those born in 1960 or later. And that means that there's a gap. There are a few years when a financial gap occurs for low-income seniors who lose their eligibility for EITC but are not yet eligible for full Social Security payments. Now, luckily, the American Rescue Plan that was considered before this committee last week addresses that income gap by removing the upper age limit for EITC, this limit of 64 years, and actually increases the amount of the credit. So in your testimony, you noted that AARP Foundation Tax Aid helped older taxpayers secure $200 million of earned income tax credits in 2019. How does expanding the earned income tax credit promote additional financial security for low-income seniors?
Right. So we do serve. The one thing we need to clarify is we do serve taxpayers of all ages. So we don't serve only those over the age of 50. So we do serve a number of younger families, through the VITA, volunteer income tax assistance grant that we also receive. But we do know that there is that gap between the upper income age limit of EITC and those older. So we do recognize that, and but we will continue. The AARP Foundation Tax Aid really, we serve toward what the tax law is. So if that tax law is changed, then we would be more than happy to, of course, continue to serve and see additional taxpayers that would be able to receive those that are eligible to receive the EITC extended.
Well, I certainly hope you can help them, because it will close the gap, that age gap, as it had existed before. So thank you so much, and I yield back.
Well, I want to thank you, Ms. Chu, and the questions were excellent, as were our other members. There is more to this than meets the eye. These are questions that are very important, because it's going to enlighten people to use these services. And I was going to ask a quick question to Ms. Villanueva, and that is, what's the threshold of how much money you have in your pocket or your assets before you're eligible for free service on your income tax? Am I making the question clear?
I can answer it as clear as I think I understand it, if that's all right with you. I can answer it on behalf of the AARP Foundation Tax Aid, is that, we We do not have an actual income limit that we put on it. Tax counseling for the elderly, the TCE grant, does not allow for an income limit, so we do not have one on there. Although the VITA, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, does have the threshold with EITC. Earnings is what they usually serve at that level. So with the multiple funding that we get and also the ARP Foundation funding, we are able to serve the majority of the taxpayers that come to us.
Thank you. That was very, very clear. That was very clear. Do you agree, Mr. Rauschenberger?
Yes.
Go ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you. And based on the members in attendance and consistent with the practice here, we are going to recognize for 5 minutes the gentlelady from Indiana, my good friend, Miss Wolarski. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you. Thanks so much to the witnesses that are here today as well. I'm just grateful for the work that you do for all of us in our districts. So I am grateful that you're here. A couple of months ago, the IRS commissioner came before the same subcommittee. I highlighted concerns around the mail backlog at the IRS processing centers around the country. At that time, there were close to 3 million pieces of unopened mail. As I understand it, that figure has been reduced now to about 1.3 million pieces, which I applaud the IRS's efforts to address this issue during the pandemic. However, I continue to hear from folks back home who are being directly impacted by the mail backlog. So this remains a matter of deep concern for me, particularly as we go into the 2020 filing season. So over the course of the past year, my caseworkers and I have heard stories from Hoosiers in my district who are facing financial difficulty due to the pandemic, but they've yet to receive the tax refund that they're owed. So these are folks who need their refunds urgently and can't afford delays. They need swift action so they can continue really to put food on the table and provide for their families. The mail backlog has no doubt also caused significant challenges for the organization represented by all of our witnesses as well. I want to just take a second to highlight the VITA program and the tax counseling for the elderly, the TCE program, which over the years have both served as critical tools for many qualifying individuals who are looking for tax filing assistance at no cost to themselves. These vital programs have become all the more critical during the pandemic, so I remain ready to work with all the organizations that we have here today to ensure that American taxpayers can quickly and fairly resolve their issues related to the IRS and the other federal agencies. But I have a question for all of you, if you could just chime in here quickly. So are your volunteers trained to deal with taxpayers who have questions about their 2019 tax return, or have they yet to receive their tax refund? And then can you just explain and touch on some of the challenges you've had in kind of navigating this issue, making sure that everybody's trained for the questions coming in? Ms. Lee Villanueva, can we just start with you and then just kind of go down?
Yes. So our volunteers are trained every year on the tax code for that year's return that they're going to be preparing, and they also pass the IRS certification test at the advanced level. And we do know that there are probably a number of taxpayers who were not able to file their 2019 returns. So we are anticipating that there will be a number of those returns that need to be completed along with the 2020 return. So the way our program works is that if a volunteer was certified in that tax year, so if they have been a volunteer for us for both the 2019 tax return and the 2020, then they can prepare both of those returns. And yes, we have been hearing also about people who did have to file with paper, that there still is a backlog of some of those being processed.
Can the rest of you weigh in?
Certainly, I'll weigh in. Actually, my own brother never received his 2019 refund. And so I recently just went through this with him and helped him navigate the systems of calling the IRS and scheduling appointment and so on and so forth. And I will say our volunteers are trained. This is the type of information that we regularly share with our network partners so that they can communicate with their volunteers. So they're well versed in helping people navigate the IRS. So there are two very common things that we encourage them to do. One is call the IRS to try to schedule an appointment with the local taxpayer assistance center. And then if all else fails, we encourage strong partnership with the Taxpayer Advocate Service and local LITCs who can also help and provide those resources as well.
Can I interrupt? Ms. Thompson, can I ask you another question while I have you really quickly? Will Prosperity Now and the other similar VITA sites be able to serve the same number of taxpayers as in prior years, even though there's fewer sites and volunteers?
We are anticipating an increase in demand and a decrease in capacity this year, just because of the nuances of the multiple service delivery options. And so we're hedging our bets, I will say, and not quite sure whether we'll be able to resume operations at the prior year filing season level.
Gotcha. I thank all of you. Out of time. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Wolarski, and you brought up a very big issue that many Congress folks are trying to deal with, and that is the question of the Postal Service and people being able to get the returns, obviously, in a reasonable time. And we're having that problems with many postal issues. And I thank you for bringing it up. And now I'm going to recognize for 5 minutes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, let me say I'm very excited to be on this committee for the 117th Congress. And I truly appreciate the work, not just your leadership, but the work of the staff in hosting this important hearing today. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us, joining the conversation, but also for the work you guys do day in and day out in helping our community, helping people file their taxes, dealing with the often complicated and oftentimes cumbersome task of filing the returns. In a normal year, normal tax years, VITA and TCE represent critical resources for seniors and working families around the country, particularly for accessing successful anti-poverty tools like the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. But for the current year, for 2020, VITA and TCE are even more important as individuals face new, unique tax events they haven't seen before, like receiving unemployment insurance or to make sure that they receive their economic impact payments. I will share with my constituents that next month in early March, we're going to host a tax seminar with the IRS to educate our constituents about the filing season and to connect them with organizations in our area providing free tax preparation services like VITA and TCE. We have several organizations in my district that offer these services, but I wish we could expand. Ms. Thompson, as you mentioned, trying to do more with less is, it may be Zen, but it is oftentimes difficult, especially in filing tax refunds. So I would love to expand the number and reach of participating organizations in my area, and certainly across the country. So Ms. Thompson, given your experience in partnering with VITA sites, I'd love to know what advice you have on how we can successfully expand the number of organizations that are providing these free services to help taxpayers.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for your question around expansion to new partners and to new organizations throughout the communities across America. There are a lot of, I would say, several projects that are underway, and one of the benefits that we experienced with the economic impact payments during the latter part of last year was that many of our partners actually did have to forge relationships and partnerships in communities where they hadn't been before, or where they were loosely tied before, to help to reach more of the underserved populations and those people who were non-filers but eligible for those economic impact payments. So we, in the future months and years, we see our partners actually growing their coalitions, their local coalitions, and strengthening those coalitions, which is a lot of the support that my organization provides to our partners as well, in order to expand the service delivery, both with expanding the availability of free tax preparation services, not to mention that all the different service delivery models will help in the coming years as well. But then also on the side of expanding awareness, increasing the awareness among the populations who are eligible for these services, making sure that they know that we're here to help.
Great, thank you. I don't know if any of the other witnesses want to touch on that. All right, Well, let me talk a little bit about eligibility specifically for the Earned Income Tax Credit, for the Child Tax Credit, for EIP. We know one of the best aspects of VNTC and similar services is that they help taxpayers participate, identify their eligibility, and participate in critical programs like EITC and CTC, and they will help ensure that constituents fully access the benefits of the EIPs. Looking beyond this tax season, what can we in Congress and members of the Ways and Means Committee do to ensure all eligible taxpayers are taking advantage of the tax credits that are available to them?
Thank you for that question. There are so many opportunities, particularly from Congress, to help make sure everyone who is eligible takes advantage of those of the credits for which they're eligible. I think a couple of things. One is around expanding the eligibility of the credit to be sure that we cover and reach those people who are childless, those who are younger, as well as those who are older seniors who are still working. And so by expanding the threshold and the eligibility on both sides of the EITC, there could be great benefit to the community. Again, with the platform that you have, it's an awesome platform to be able to reach to partner agencies, particularly other government agencies who are serving the same populations, and ensure that they are also carrying the messages towards their constituents about the EITC and the eligibility.
Thank you very much.
I'm out of time, so I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider, and thank you to our panel. And now I'm going to call on, for 5 minutes, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Wenstrup, and we're honored to have him with us today.
Well, thank you, Chairman Pascrell, and thanks, Ranking Member Kelly, for having us here today and for this timely and obviously very important hearing. You know, with the 2021 tax filing season kicked off just this past week, there's little doubt that's going to be complicated, and again this year because of the ongoing pandemic. And but between the unprecedented economic recovery measures enacted through 2020 and the millions of taxpayers who had unemployment benefits fraudulently claimed in their names, the existing mail backlog, unprocessed 2019 returns at the IRS, our constituents, they're facing a tough filing season and they're scrambling, as you all know. And I do want to thank the chairman for specifically raising the issue of the tremendous amount of unemployment benefits fraud our constituents are facing this year. This is something I've been incredibly concerned about. We're hearing from a lot of people about it, and I look forward to working with the chairman for solutions on this. And maybe we have a hearing on it, Mr. Chairman, to help these victims of identity theft and fraud during this tax filing season, because we're all hearing about it, and I see you're nodding your head, and I appreciate that, sir. And finally, I want to thank all of our witnesses that are here today and the work that you do and all the volunteers you represent that do the work each and every year to help millions of taxpayers file their returns. That is a huge benefit to so many Americans. You provide it for communities, low-income individuals, senior citizens, and I know many of our constituents will again be looking for your help, and I appreciate you doing that. Mr. Rauschenberger, given your experience on the ground both last year and what we're gearing up for this year, I think the perspective and recommendations you can offer are incredibly important as we look for solutions or ideas. And I want to ask you about the concerns you laid out in your testimony regarding virtual delivery methods and the lack of interest from volunteers. And my staff in Ohio have also heard from tax filers who are hesitant to use virtual preparation services for one reason or another, and especially for some who may be newer to electronic filing or may lack reliable internet access. There's really just no substitute for in-person services. We all get that and understand that, but we're trying to come up with solutions. And you know, you work with a lot of seniors and serve an area that's somewhat rural. Have any of your volunteers or clients been able to use the virtual service methods either last year or this year?
Here in Butler County, the virtual methods were actually just introduced to us in late 2020 for consideration of adopting them for this current tax season. So we really don't have prior experience with them. It was more trying to decide which of those methods would work in our environment. And in order to work, the first thing is you need the volunteers' buy-in, because it doesn't really matter if the clients can do it. If the volunteers aren't willing to do it, then it's a moot point. And what I'm saying is less than half of my volunteers were interested in even going there. Now, I didn't ask them why they didn't want to do it, but just knowing what I know about it, I understand that, I mean, it would involve learning. You know, there's a learning curve with these other methods, and not knowing, well, just realizing that they would, you know, that it's going to require more time on from their standpoint to learn the new system, the new way of doing it. I think a lot of them just felt like, you know, they're already contributing a fair amount of time. And again, remember, we're dealing with a volunteer workforce here. You know, they're not being paid to learn this stuff. All of them so far are willing to give of their time and their energy and their effort to provide this service for free. So in leadership, our hands are largely tied by what would be accepted by our volunteers. I mean, we can try to encourage them along, but at the end of the day, if they choose not to do it, then it doesn't really matter what we come up with. But again, some of those things honestly won't work here in Western Pennsylvania.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, there's clearly many, it's fraught with complications, especially in rural areas or underserved areas,
right,
if you will. It's clearly a problem. But if there are things that our district or DC offices can be communicating to the volunteers to help them open more doors for in-person assistance, we'll be glad to try and do it. And if you come up with some best practices that would make people feel more comfortable for in-person, we'll be glad to share that knowledge as best we can. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Wenstrup. We're happy to have you here today. And now I'm going to turn and recognize the gentle lady from the Virgin Islands. How about some weather up here for a change? I want to introduce our good friend, Ms. Plaskett, and you have 5 minutes, and fire away.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I really don't have many questions. I really just wanted to acquaint myself and orient myself to the issues that are so relevant right now that you have with these witnesses, to hold this first hearing during the 117th Congress on free tax preparation services during the pandemic. The only thing I would note, of course, is that the witnesses are aware that Virgin Islanders, along with those members of the individuals who reside in the territories, have additional requirements because of our mirror code that require us to have much more meticulous tax, practices and ensure that we are being very appropriate in our filing. And I wanted to know if you all, particularly with the changes that were made in the tax laws, how that is going to, affect Virgin Islanders or those that are in the mirror code areas in the next tax filing season. If any of the witnesses have any thoughts on that.
Congresswoman Plaskett, thank you for your question, and I am going to ask permission to follow up with you on that and to connect with some of our partners throughout our network to find out who prepares returns for clients who are Virgin Islanders and what issues and concerns that they see.
I know that in the past we've had particular needs from the tax advocacy group who've supported Virgin Islanders who have to file under the mirror code. That becomes increasingly more difficult as changes are made in the tax code for those individuals not being able to receive the kind of support that they need to ensure that they're then not audited by the IRS and others. And so I just wanted to make sure that those tax preparation services are available, not just for Virgin Islanders, but I know that my brothers and sisters living in Guam, Northern Marianas, and American Samoa have particular needs living in those areas related to the Mirror Code.
Thank you very, very much, Congresswoman. And I think everybody's got to remember that because you're on one of our islands out in the ocean someplace, it doesn't in any manner, shape, or form reduce your significance or status. And that has to be clear before we do anything, period.
Well,
Thank you.
I always appreciate your support, Mr. Chairman, for the people in the territories. I know that the government of the Virgin Islands is always concerned when we have these tax credits, whether they be child tax credits or earned income tax credits, because under the Mirror Code, then the government has to pay those monies out to individual taxpayers. And we're always hopeful and anticipating whether or not the federal government is going to do a reimbursement for us. Over the years, we've lost tremendous, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars over the years in lost income to the general fund of our territories as monies were doled out for earned income tax credit and child tax credits without the reimbursement from the federal government. So I know that I can count on you, Mr. Chairman, and the other members of the committee, hopefully, to support us in making sure that we receive those reimbursements.
Thank you, Ms. Plaskett. I wanted to have you here today. I'm going to now turn for 5 minutes, gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Ferguson. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the witnesses, thank you so much for not only your time here today, but your efforts to help our fellow Americans file their taxes. And I've got a couple of questions here, and I'm happy to, I'll try to direct them to individuals. And the purpose of these questions is to really kind of understand where we are in this process, because I think every single person on this subcommittee wants to try to help make sure that that the taxpayers are able to file their taxes and get the returns that they're entitled to. So please know that these questions are not meant to be pointed. They're just trying to get good information. So, Ms. Thompson, I'm gonna start with you. Do you operate in more urban or more rural areas, and do you know if there's a bigger discrepancy between urban suburban filers and rural filers and their access? Do you see more of a delay in one area or not, or do they seem to be about the same?
Thank you for your question. I would say that we have more sites that are in urban areas versus rural areas, only because there are more people, and those are the urban areas are more population centers. When I first started running a Vita site, I was in Gainesville, Florida, and I covered 5 counties, one of which was a very rural county that only had one stoplight. It was very challenging for me from Gainesville to actually try to deliver services out to the communities because I was not there and present all the time. What we see among our partners is that they really do work to try to find partners in rural communities so that we can actually increase the availability of services in those areas. It's just slow moving. And when people change jobs and people move and then a pandemic hits, it exacerbates the situation and causes it to take more time.
Okay, thank you. The next one, and I don't know if y'all would have access to this information. And Mr. Chairman, maybe we can get staff to look at this as well. But do any of you know if there's a delay, or do you see a difference in tax filings in states that have reopened or partially reopened versus those that have remained closed? Mr. Gary, I'll ask you that one. If you just take a shot at it. If you don't have it, we'll try to get that information from the staff.
I don't have any way of answering that. I have no information to say either way. Sorry.
Okay. And then finally, just to spread this around, Ms. Lee Villanueva. I'm sorry.
I did hear, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'd hit my mute button accidentally. Do you know if there's a difference between the capacity and the number of folks coming in as a percentage to your organization or to any of these incredible helpful organizations versus the for-profit tax filers that we see around that tend to spring up on a regular basis? Are you seeing, is there a big difference between what you're doing and because in some cases the two groups serve the same population? And I'm just curious if anybody's got any input between the free service that you do versus the for-profit service that we see popping up.
Well, I don't have a comparison between the two as far as the number of people going, to each of them. I do know that we do have a very high demand for our services right now. And as I was saying in my testimony, we really are seeing even a larger demand than we have in previous years, at least at this point of the season. And we do have concern about capacity and whether or not we're going to be able to serve the full demand that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you for that. And Mr. Chairman, one final comment here. The reason I'm asking these questions is we'll ultimately have a discussion about pushing back the filing deadline, and obviously that creates a tremendous number of problems in terms of revenue coming into the federal government, in terms of getting returns back to people, And I look at it, and there's some areas of the country that seem to be doing a lot better than other areas of the country. And do we push it back for everyone, or can we find a more targeted way to do this? And my hope is we can find a very targeted approach to that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad that you yield back your time. We're going to have staff work on the very important questions that you asked, Mr. Ferguson. And I thank you for participating today, and have a wonderful weekend. And now I'm going to recognize for 5 minutes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Evans. You're on, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership on this very important issue. The question I would like to ask is to the entire panel. Of the taxpayers you have assisted for filing this season, would you say that a lot of them are in immediate need of financial assistance?
Thank
Could
you
I
so
ask you to repeat the last part of your question again? I apologize.
I said basically, of the people, would you say that a lot of them are in immediate need of financial assistance?
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna go. What did I hear? Somebody said yes.
That was me trying to be brief.
Okay, that's good. I'm happy about that. That's good.
Yeah. Most of the folks who visit our tax site every year are in need of financial assistance, and a lot of them look to the refunds that they receive through tax credits for financial relief in that tax season. And this year, more so. Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you compare, obviously we're in the middle of the pandemic, it's highly unusual. If you make a comparison of the current year we're in versus past year, you see more of an immediacy of their needs?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we haven't seen too many taxpayers yet, but we see what's going on in the community with higher unemployment, need for emergency assistance such as food and rental assistance, and we know that folks are concerned.
Is that everybody on the panel?
I can tell a story of a partner who told us that they had just opened their sites and they had clients coming in, and this is just an indication of the need. And the need for information as well, because this particular client looked at their tax return, looked at their refund amount, and began asking questions about an extended child tax credit and the next round of EIPs and where funds for both of those are. And so we see people who are, strapped for cash, and they come in with a need, but then they also come in with a need for information and an understanding about what is actually going on in Congress, and where where they stand with regard to additional benefits that they may be eligible to receive in the coming months.
The other gentleman, does he have any comment? Yes.
I would agree that since we frequently see individuals that are low-income folks, that they in general would be in greater need of additional funds at the moment. However, the tax season for us, we haven't actually seen anyone yet. But even under the best of circumstances, we wouldn't have actually opened until this week because the IRS didn't start processing returns until last Friday anyway. So it's a little too early to say for sure. But again, just based upon past practice, I would say that the need is greater now than it has been in previous years.
That real quick, Mr. Chairman, that's really what I was trying to find out, is compare to as you go into this season versus 2020, 2019. I'm just making a comparison. And I think it's important for all members on the committee to have an understand exactly the immediacy of getting things done. That's really what I was looking for from you. Okay. I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
I want to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Evans, and I'm glad you brought up that very important issue at the end. And of course, Mr. Rauschenberger did a good job in summing up what the others have said and giving you some good direction. So, we got a tool out here that we've got to bevel to make sure it works even more the next time. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Pennsylvania. See, Pennsylvania always shows up. Mr. Schmucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There you are.
Can you hear me? Yes, Pennsylvania's in the house, so we're here. It's always a pleasure to see my colleague, Mr. Evans, and to work with him. We worked in the state legislature together, and now here in DC. So good to see you, Dwight. And I want to start by just saying thank you to each of you who are witnesses here, not only for being on the call here today, but for the work that you do. I can tell you, I've visited vital locations in my district and have seen the value of the service that you provide to people who really need your help. And I've also seen the way that volunteers have been engaged in the process and do it year after year, just because they love doing it. They love the interaction with folks, and they just love helping people in that way. So I thank you for what you do, and I'd like to thank the chair for this hearing to talk about and highlight these services being provided and how they've been impacted by COVID. I did want to, Mr. Rauschenberger, you specifically mentioned the how the rollout of vaccines would help, and I think what you had said was it's going to help people be more comfortable coming in person. And also potentially help more volunteers be more comfortable with helping. I've been, we're both in Pennsylvania, and I've been a little disappointed in Pennsylvania that we're one of the lowest in the list in terms of the percentage of our population that's been vaccinated. So I'm concerned about that, but I'm interested in hearing how that how is impacting you. If you just expand a little bit on how a vaccine rollout will improve your organization's ability to both recruit volunteers and to meet the needs of your customers.
Okay, well, I guess the first thing I would say is about 10% of my volunteers chose not to recertify to volunteer for this year because of concerns surrounding the virus. So I was kind of, our capacity to serve was decreased going into the season. And again, that was an individual decision. It was not up to us to pressure people one way or volunteers one way or the other to volunteer in our program this year. If that's the decision that they made, then we respected it. And we look forward to them coming back next year, hopefully when things are safer. But as far as serving other clients in person, our national organization is relying upon a virus map that's put together by Johns Hopkins University that is capable of indicating what the current situation is, the status of the virus in every county across the United States. So I'm sure they're keeping themselves busy, accumulating that data all the time. But the way that our organization has approached this is that in order to provide the more in-person time that you spend with a client, then the better the situation has to be with the virus in that community. In other words, if the virus is in epidemic stage, well, they're totally fine with one of the methods that is completely, there's no customer interaction at all. But again, that's one of the options that, like I say, that won't work, in our area. I mean, we just don't have the clients that are technologically enough able to work the technology to make that happen. But to get back to like where we've done it traditionally, to do in-person service for an hour or an hour and a half appointment, that requires the virus to be in a very controlled state. And we're obviously not there right now. But because this year now we have these vaccines that are being introduced, my hope is that if we get all of our volunteers vaccinated, and since the majority of our clients naturally will want to be vaccinated, that in a relatively short period of time, in other words, the providers of the service.
I'm going to stop you, Mr. Rauschenberger, if I may, because I have a minute left, and I wanted to just quickly ask another question. Maybe I'll just ask of you since I have you on here. And I, by the way, appreciate you being here, and I'm glad the ranking member, who's another good member from Pennsylvania, brought you on. But my next question is, I get two questions in regards to the IRS right now from constituents. One is, when's my refund coming? I was just talking to a constituent yesterday who had a situation where it's been a year and someone has not received a $4,500 refund, which is very, very important to them. But then the other is about the economic impact payments, the direct payments from COVID relief. Some people just have been unable to get those, even though they go on the IRS website and so on and so forth. And we're hoping that gets rectified when they file their taxes, and they're going to be able to get that impact payment. Is that true? Do you think that is it working that way? Will people be able who have not had access, who've not been able to get their impact payment? Will they get that during the process? Are you seeing that occurring now during the filing process?
Yeah, it's my understanding that they will get it. And again, because we haven't actually been doing it yet, I don't know. I can't say that I've seen it work, but I don't have any reason to think that it's not going to work.
Okay, well, I hope so. I'm curious very much how that's going to work. I know I'm out of time. Thank you, and I'm sorry I had to cut you off in your first answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Schmucker. We enjoyed your questions, and thank you to the panelists who answered the question. The chair, I want to recognize for 5 minutes the gentleman from Nevada, my good friend, Mr. Horsford. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I want to appreciate you first for holding this critically important and timely hearing to discuss free tax preparation services during this pandemic. As has been pointed out, now more than ever, our constituents will need help navigating this tax filing season, given the effects this pandemic has caused on families and individuals throughout the country. That's why I'm so glad we have organizations participating in the volunteer income tax assistance programs with the IRS. VITA helps millions of taxpayers earning less than $57,000 in income to file their taxes for free. And I want to thank all of the volunteers across the country for all of the support and the assistance that you provide to taxpayers who really do need it. Specifically, I want to highlight the work that Pat Smith and the Nevada Free Taxes Coalition provide to thousands of Southern Nevadans every single year. The Nevada Free Taxes Coalition provides free tax assistance to low and moderate income individuals and families, people with limited English proficiency, veterans, seniors, people with disabilities, and individuals living throughout rural areas. This work is critical to ensure that all Nevadans receive the tax credits that they are entitled to. In fact, I partnered with the Nevada Free Taxes Coalition last February at an economic forum and tax clinic where I was able to understand more about how they promote the program and work with our community to get more Nevadans the tax assistance that they need. The Nevada Free Taxes Coalition does great work partnering with community institutions in my district, such as the Doolittle Senior Center, the Pearson Community Center, and the Pahrump Community Library, just to name a few. But due to COVID-19, many of the VITA sites in Nevada had to close, and others are offering limited access to the service. Despite this pandemic, the Nevada Free Taxes Coalition was able to help 7,000 individuals, families, students, seniors, disabled persons, and veterans claim the Earned Income Tax Credit and other credits, returning over $7.7 million in refunds last year. Unfortunately, COVID-19, as we all know, is still ravaging our communities. Now that we are in a tax season, Congress must do everything possible to make sure that the VITA program and the tax counseling for the elders program have the resources that they need to make sure individuals and families can receive the tax credits that they're entitled to, direct cash payments that individuals may not have received but qualify for, and offer the peace of mind that they will receive great tax preparation service. So with that, I want to focus my questions on access to services. For Ms. Thompson and Ms. Lee Villanueva, I just hosted a telephone town hall Tuesday night with seniors from throughout my district about signing up for the COVID-19 vaccinations. Several seniors on that call mentioned that they didn't have internet services and wanted to know other ways to sign up for vaccinations. So my question is, for those same exact seniors, what services are being offered for individuals without internet access, and what outreach is being conducted to notify them of this free tax preparation service?
Yes, thank you. This is Lynette. I can start. So with AARP Foundation Tax Aid, we have the different options that are available. I don't know if I've really explained clearly our low contact model, but this is where the taxpayer actually can come into a physical site and then either have their tax documents scanned or dropped off and cataloged so that they're only there for right around 15 minutes, and then they go on their way and the return is prepared, and then they come back at another time to complete the process. So this is one that we're hoping that we'll be able to provide that service where it's not a full in-person, where the taxpayer is there the entire time that the return is being prepared, but it does provide that service, for them, and we are hoping that that will be service as long as our facilities that are able to open.
And Ms. Thompson, real quick before my time is expired.
Just ditto to everything that Lynette said. And thank you for the shout out. Pat Smith and Nevada Free Tax Coalition are wonderful partners.
They are. We'll provide more information on our website for people, but thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, and to my colleagues for this hearing today.
Thank you, Mr. Horsford. Some great questions, and thank you to our panel again. And now I'm going to turn to Ms. Moore of Wisconsin. The gentlelady has 5 minutes. Ms. Moore, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And just let me say how delighted I am to be serving once again on this subcommittee. Let me just add my voice to talk about the importance of this panel. I have learned a lot just listening to them today. I just wanted to briefly ask Ms. Zydema, how do you, quote unquote, recruit folk to come and avail themselves of your services? Is it just first come, first serve, sign up yourself? Does, like does United Way or ARP send out notices to targeted people? And there's a very specific reason that I'm asking that. So could you share with me just briefly what your recruitment efforts are?
Sure, thanks for the question. We put information out in the community. In a traditional year, we probably use a lot of print resources to spread the word, working with community organizations and faith-based groups to get the word out, as well as social media promotion, and then using 211, which is in every community, information and referral. And then most sites offer appointment setting, which we feel is the best way to manage crowd control and also be respectful of people's time when they come out. And so we make appointments on the phone or over the internet.
Well, thank you so much for that. The reason I asked that question is because the uptake of the EITC and maybe the child tax credit is not where we want it to be. And we know without any debate that these are life-changing and life-sustaining benefits. These EIPs, there's not a day that goes by that I don't get a call or a text from a constituent saying, when are we going to get the next EIP? And the reason that I'm raising this is because throughout this pandemic and crisis, the IRS created a new utility, a tool, the non-filer portal. For those people who don't file income taxes, who don't even know that they're entitled to their EIP or CTC or EITC. And we are wondering, I have just written a letter, as a matter of fact, and I would like to add this letter to the record without objection, Mr. Chairman. It's a letter to the Honorable Janet Yellen and to Charles Reddick, the Commissioner of the IRS, to say we need to use this non-filer portal to identify people who, but for our outreach, would not even know, and then maybe refer them to Avita providers.
Ms. Moore, I just wanted you to know that without objection is so ordered.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
In fact, in September, the IRS sent out 9 million letters to people who had not filed income taxes to let them know about the EIP. So we know that they have the capacity to do this. And I guess I know that you're burdened. I heard Ms. Thompson, you loud and clear say that we need more money. You need more money to do what you do. I just want to point out, Mr. Chairman, that the latest data I could track down, we have $441 billion in our tax gap, taxes that are not being collected. So we can find the money to shore up what the IRS, provide more services, especially now. So I just want some feedback, maybe from you, Ms. Thompson, maybe from Ms. Zydema, but about how, if you had the money and if the IRS were able to refer people to you based on zip code or whatever and say, here are people we've identified, we really think that would be, I just want you to affirm that might be a way. Also, Mr. Chairman, we don't offer telephone services anymore through the IRS to fill out forms, and just wondering. So I would yield now my 15 seconds to Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. We've asked the IRS for that data and information and the stats on the 9 million letters that they sent out. We actually, so it's a great help to get that information by zip code because our partners can then target their marketing to the zip codes and to the areas where we know that there are non-filers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Moore. And we appreciate your questions and your thoughts, as always. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Rebecca Thompson, Lynette Lee Villanueva, Yvonne Zydema, and Mr. Rauschenberger were excellent witnesses, answered all the questions, had some thoughts that we need to reconsider here. Time is running out, unfortunately, but we will reconsider it. The members have 2 weeks to submit written questions to be answered later in the writing. Those questions and your answers will be made part of the formal hearing record. And I am sure after we've heard the witnesses, our members on both sides will be thinking of recommendations to shore up this needed service that can work even better if we help it along. So thank you all for being here. The members asked terrific questions. I really appreciate your presence today and the fact that they did do what we asked them to do. So God bless. We'll be with you soon. The subcommittee stands adjourned. God bless.